Welcome to POV, the Portland Ovations podcast. I'm Aimée, Petrin, Ovations Executive and Artistic Director. And today I'm joined by my friend Ari Solotoff to talk about our upcoming season. Welcome, Ari.
Hi, Aimée.
It's so good to have you here with us today, and not that you need much of an introduction, but I'm going to give you one just the same. You are an intellectual property and entertainment attorney. You are the former executive vice president of the Philadelphia Orchestra, and before that, the executive director of both the Portland Symphony Orchestra and the Pensacola Symphony Orchestra. You are sought after nationally to speak on the arts and entertainment industry. You serve on a couple of boards. Aren't you also teaching at Juilliard or Eastman right now, or both?
Both, yeah. I'm getting a little tired just listening to my own background.
And do you have any patents pending or anything like that we should know about?
No.
Okay. So great. Did I miss anything else that we need to know about you as we start?
No, thank you for the introduction. It's awesome to be here and to just share the opportunity to talk about the upcoming season with you.
Well, thank you. And just for a little bit more background, when Ari was the executive director at Portland Symphony Orchestra, we spent a lot of time together. So when we were talking about having this conversation and we were thinking about who would I love to be in conversation with, I thought, why not Ari? We used to have so many conversations back in the day, and we would talk about art and we would talk about why and what and where, and here's an excuse to do it again.
I know, it's great. It's awesome. It's good to be back talking music and art in Portland and our community with you.
Well, thank you. So let's dig in. Let's talk about the 2021-22 Portland Ovations season.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I was looking at the season, getting ready for today, and of course, one of the things that struck me the most is dance. I mean, dance has always been such a hallmark of Portland Ovations activity or programming. Mm-hmm. Maybe talk about that as a starting point for the way in.
Sure, I'd love to. And I also want to mention to folks that are listening that we are actually in studio and we are masked. So if you notice any muffling or any kind of strange scratching noises, that is because we are practicing our COVID health and safety, and we are masked here in the studio. So dance. First and foremost, I would just say dance. You can't pick a favorite art form. It's like picking a favorite child. But I will say that dance is one of the 5 art forms that speak to me the most, among the 5 that all speak to me the most. And the thing about dance that I get so excited about is I find myself having a full sensory relationship to it. I watch it. I get kinetic in trying to feel the movement in my own body. I also have a kinetic experience of breathing with the dancers. And so when I'm thinking about programming dance for Ovations audiences, I'm always thinking about what is the most diverse and dynamic experience we can share. So it's dynamic in scale, it's dynamic in art, in vocabulary, in tradition. All of those things come into dance for us.
And the bookends of the season kind of tell the story in a way. You've got Bandaloop, which starts this sort of public space dance, like our way back into the performance space, the performance hall, if you will, and then the Riley Watts Commission at the end.
Oh, I'm glad you say it like that. I hadn't even thought about them as bookends, and it's true because they are such bookends because Bandaloop is big, it's large, it's public. It is so completely about being... It's actually going to be outdoors, which is really fabulous for our season and just being together in performance. And it's about scale and largeness and seeing things in different ways. And then we get to Riley Watts, who is creating a piece in partnership with Heather Stewart, a solo dance work. That's going to be very introspective and very much of the mind and body and the singularity of his space and what he's thinking about. And so it is. I hadn't thought about like that. It's like this really big, and then it comes really small, and you have to start to focus in.
Yeah, I think what's always magical about dance and movement in particular is how many different senses it draws upon. Mm-hmm. And we've been inside for 18 months. So to kind of go outside back, into our performing arts experience and to experience something on a public scale with other people in a safe outdoor setting seems like a great way back into the season.
That's exactly what we were thinking about. And when we brought Bandaloop a couple of years ago, back in 2017, the thing we heard time and time again from people was, thank you for this gift. People would stop us on the street and literally say, I was there, thank you for that gift. And so thinking about that need, and for us all to feel some joy, and for us to feel good about where we are and where we live, and for us to be able to experience some art in a different way. And I think to your point too, with dance, it's such a three-dimensional art form. You know, it's some, if not more. And so to be able to be live in that space is really important, because dance gets so flattened on the screen. Even all the best, dance on film projects and all of it, every attempt, it still flattens. And so this is going to be really extraordinary.
And I love this idea of just like bringing back or seeing artists who have been here before, because it's like a continuing conversation in a way from where you were a couple years ago.
Exactly. And even deepening the relationship we have with the artist deepens as well, because, we can build on what we did last time artistically, or build on what we were thinking about in terms of how we approached the city. And this year was really important to try to get we wanted to get down towards the water. There was something about getting towards the water too that was really important. The last time we really wanted Bandaloop to bookmark, if you will, bookend the Arts District, and this time we really wanted to sort of be down in Old Port. We wanted to be in some of the work that they have has a strong connection to water, and we really want to make that connection.
Which is so Portland. It's just
so Portland,
and Portland is changing like every day. It feels especially from when we came here in 2006. I think
it feels 2006.
Like a lot has changed. So to reconnect with the waterfront and how it's evolving, what a great way in.
Exactly. So, and in the middle of that, we also have Sphinx.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, not Sphinx. Step Africa, which is this fantastic high energy. Something that appeals to all ages. And Step Africa was actually with us this year virtually. So there's a lot of people that I know are already excited to see Step Africa, because they took a workshop with them, a digital workshop, and they learned how to do some stepping. I will admit I did it myself. There's a reason I don't dance, but I had a lot of fun doing it. So that's the other Step Africa in our family of dance next year.
And is that connected to the Seeking Resonance program?
It is.
Theme?
It is. So we announced that this last year as well. So Seeking Resonance is, it actually started in, I think, 2016. And we were really using it at that time to talk about performance that was either based in or inspired by religion and spiritual life. And it's really evolved as we've, in the last couple of years, to think about Seeking Resonance, about being that connection with a place and a space, and what it means to feel at home, or what it feels even to connect inward with yourself, and to have those connections then with each other. So it's about connecting with yourself, connecting with another person, and then connecting with the space. And as we thought about that, we realized that that really was also happening was thinking about migration, and thinking about what it means for people to feel welcome, safe, valued. And so Seeking Resonance has really pulled open this whole new way of thinking about those themes. And we've been working in partnership with Indigo Arts Alliance, partnership that in all reality started over a decade ago, with Marcia Minter being on our board for over a decade, and then has evolved now into a partnership between Ovations and Indigo to really bring these projects to the community, to create context, to really look at the intellectual rigor and artistic pursuit of these artists, and to find ways to really connect them here in our community.
It's amazing. I mean, for those who don't know about Indigo Arts Alliance, could you just share a brief word of who they are and why this is such a meaningful partnership?
Sure. And I'll just give people, I'm going to be brief, because we're going to actually hopefully have a whole podcast dedicated to this down the road. But what I will share is that Indigo Arts Alliance was founded by Marcia and Daniel Minter. I think it's at 3 years now. And it's a nonprofit here in Portland, dedicated to supporting and cultivating artists of the African diaspora. So what's really interesting too in how we come together as organizations is that, Ovations is a presenter of live performance. They tend to work more in the visual arts experience. So that's really a lovely way to sort of complement each other. And also they're very much about the ideation and incubation of projects, whereas we are in the presentation end of projects. So we really love now to bring it, to knit these two pieces together so that when we share a company like Step Africa or Sphinx Virtuosi or Leonardo Sandoval, or who am I missing in that list? Cartography, thank you. Our producer just voiced in for us, thank you, Katie Day, that when we're looking at any of those 4 projects, we're looking at them from that beginning point of what the artist's intent was all the way to what the audience's experiences.
Right. And you're, even within that, Ovations is incubating its own projects and commissions, both with O'Reilly Watts, but also like the Samuel James Commission, which is kind of an extension of that.
Well, exactly.
Yeah.
And that's the thing about our series next year, our season this year, is that Seeking Resonance is very much a project and partnership with Indigo, and many of those themes actually exist beyond the 4 projects. So Samuel James is a great example. His project is also about connecting with home, and I think most listeners will probably know who Samuel James is. He is an amazing Maine-based guitarist, roots blues musician, and he is creating a new piece of work, a new set of music that is focused on his background, his family background of being biracial. So he has family going back a long time here in Maine, and he has family going back in Texas, and then looking at music that we consider, say, traditional music in this country, who wrote it, who owns it, who gets to play it, and really starts to dig into that sense of the history of this music. Again, connecting to home. Like, I love he's connecting also to home.
Well, home, what we think of as home is it's rapidly changing, and it means something different based on who you are, where you came from, your background, your history, your culture, what you consume culturally, and so this lens of home permeates through the season in so many different ways. And then at the same time, like, I'm just so drawn to like the Partido program that you were talking about, the Sandoval program, because it's, here's another reflection or refraction of sort of the Afro-Brazilian diaspora, here in programming, in dance,
and it's live music,
and it's live,
right.
And so that's this connection point, and then all of these other ways in which you've got the global programs. The Blind Boys of Alabama coming.
With Amadou and Miriam,
right?
And it's a once in a lifetime, because this is like a super band. This isn't a double bill. This isn't somebody opening for somebody else. This is all of them on stage at the same time, playing amazing music. And I just got goosebumps. What I love too is in thinking about that program and how they talk about it. It's, we've got artists from Mali and we have artists from southern United States. Why do these two work together? And it's because they're both doing soul music. They're both doing roots music, but they're both doing folk music of their space and time, and they're both completely rooted in the joy of this music. So it makes total sense. It doesn't make sense when you look at it on the surface, but then when you think about it and you start to feel the energy of their music,
right,
and the pure joy that they have in sharing that music, it totally makes sense.
Right. It's like the music is the point of connection. We might be accustomed to thinking on kind of geographic terms, but yet the music actually expands our definition of what is the world of music that we share. And here they're occupying that on stage together.
Exactly. I was thinking about too, when you were talking about home, what is home and how it's changed, and even what does home mean to all of us now? What did it mean to us 18 months ago, and what does it mean to us now? Whether that means your home is also your office, or your home is, a different kind of space. But the sense of home is really continues to be, I think, something we all really value and feel our own relationship to. And I think the other thing that I think about when I think about this season is a lot of it was actually planned 2-3 years ago now, which all the programs with Indigo was planned 3 years ago. A lot of this was. So on the one hand, I'm like so eager to finally experience it as a season. And it's been interesting to live with this work for that long too.
Right. With a completely different world sphere within the pandemic and how we have experienced our own homes and the kind of both the intimacy and the insularity of it. And so, I wonder actually if you could talk a bit about like how Ovations is adapting within this time period and will be within the changing pandemic conditions that we have.
Sure. So the last year, wow, there's a lot of things we did. And I feel like so many arts organizations and cultural organizations did amazing, creative, innovative ways of changing how they worked. So, as I kind of joke, when your business model is to get as many people as you can into a room from all over the world for as long as possible, this does not make for good pandemic business model. So the first thing that we did was that we, like so many of our peers, we shifted to a digital format. In doing so, though, we stayed committed to live. So even if we were, say, broadcasting a concert that had been pre-recorded, we made sure that the artist joined us live in that Zoom space or whatever platform we were on, so that, there were times when we had, we had folks coming in from Germany, at, I forget even what time it was their time, but it was late. Another time we had this amazing Algerian musician joining us from France. And again, just because we wanted to make sure that we stayed live.
Like time zones kind of obliterated.
Well, that became part of our planning. Like, okay, so if we do a performance at 7 and they're done by 8, that means they're joining us at 12. That doesn't feel so bad. They can join us at 1 a.m. They're musicians. They're used to this. So that was one of the things we did. We also... Similarly, our director of Ovations Offstage School Program, Sarah Coleman, she did a fantastic job shifting all her programming to digital for schools and had huge success and huge relationship and, built a great program with Samuel James, another great program with Step Africa, again, artists that we're going to see now, but that were in our digital space last year. And then we also commissioned 5 Maine-based projects. So Samuel James and Riley are 2 of them. They're the first 2 we're going to see out of that commission program. And then we also have Dee Clark, who is the director of Survivor Speak and is an advocate and playwright tackling the issue of sex trafficking here in Maine. We also have Karam Durdog and Andy Happel, who are writing the epic immigrant story musical with all of the fullness of a musical and the epicness, and really tracing the story of the immigrant experience. So again, we're back to seeking resonance as a concept of home. And then we are partnering with the Abbey Museum to commission a new presentation, afternoon, evening of stories by Native storytellers here in Maine.
Wonderful.
So that's some of the pivoting. And then the other pivoting is really, we also have some live in the park stuff that we did. But the other pivoting is to figure out really now when to be digital, when to be live, how to hold on to the digital aspect, because we also found that people were joining us. We were in the Step Africa workshop Saturday morning, and there's some guy from Florida there, or and we had people joining us from all over the country for things. And working with like the Kennedy Center, the Library of Congress last year, we had opportunity to be really on a national footprint. So we were enjoying that space, the challenge of it, and the innovation, and the real true reach of it. So that is one of the things we really continue to think about: is when does it make sense? Hopefully not as a necessity for everything, but more of a when is this an enhancement to what we're doing?
Strategically, and it will be meaningful to the audience or to the families or students
exactly.
who wouldn't otherwise be able to attend for whatever reason.
Yeah. And going back to with students, we found that, for them to have access to some kind of program for weeks, for 3 weeks, as opposed to you need to be in this seat at this time for this hour. It was much easier for folks to come in and come out of the programming at their convenience and built into their curriculum, which was good.
Could we talk a bit about like family programming
Sure.
and programming for kids? I love seeing Rosie Revere on the program. I love those books.
I do too. We have Iggy Peck. Actually, my son went to school for, I don't know if it was Halloween or, no, it was just like favorite book character day. He went as Iggy Peck, the architect,
Right.
which was good for mom because I was able to draw a, pair of pants, white t-shirt, sneakers, and out of the closet as opposed to suddenly having to build a costume. But they're great. Yeah, those are great stories.
It's a great series. And so how does that anchor some of the family programming or participate within it?
So, great question. So there's a couple ways that we think about programming for young audiences. And first and foremost, and this is where I wish Sarah, my colleague Sarah, were here because she speaks to this so wonderfully and smartly and eloquently. But the first and foremost is that we make sure that the theater for young audiences or the performances for young audiences is not a dumbing down experience, that they are getting full-on productions with quality and expertise. And for the youngest of the young, most often we are connecting to a title because it's a great way to sort of make the leap from page to stage. And it's also a way to, and I'm just thinking even about my own experience with my own child, bringing him to, Very Hungry Caterpillar, like that made sense to him. He could kind of connect with this. Also by having the titles, we are able to do our program called Cultivating Curiosity, which is a program where we give free books to the students who are attending the performance to bring home. So it's not about adding to the school libraries, although we do that too. It's really about having these children go home with these books and having them feel the ownership of those books and to add to their home library. And just based on language acquisition, or not language, but literacy acquisition, we know that the more books kids that have in their own home libraries, the more successful they'll be as readers and as learners, and it just goes from there. Right. And then the other thing we think a lot about is what's family friendly. So what can be available for all ages. So whereas Rosie Revere and Friends, which again is Rosie Revere, Iggy Peck architect, Ada Twist scientist. Right. There's at least one more and two more coming, and they're great too because those books are also. So we've got women empowerment. Ada Twist is a young Black girl in the title, so these are really great stories about centering non-white narratives as well, right. Or at least not always male-based as well. So then when we move off of those, then we get into things like Flip Fabrique or Golden Dragon Agrabats, and even Cartography, which is a little bit older based. And those are really programs that the whole family can enjoy. Right. And that's really meant to bring the littles along in the theater experience.
And the program with the theatrical program where they all come on stage with envelopes, is that the Flip Fabrique program? Or
yeah. Yes, it is. Yes, and it's actually quite interactive the way they've set that up. And interestingly, that piece 6 Degrees, when they set it up initially, when they built it, they were building it with this idea of social distancing. Yeah. They were building it on the concept of what if we all were sort of in our own hula hoop, like literally our own hula hoop. That's how it started. And then they kind of create this whole, now they've created this whole, it's not a whodunit, but they've got this nice little sort of audience piece to it where the audience is really connected.
Which is amazing because I think one of the hardest things as a parent has been to try to like make some sense of the pandemic to young, like our children, and sort of say like, here's what's going on, and is there some way that we can understand this in an artistic way, that we are all interconnected even when we're apart. Right. And so the fact that that's like already woven into the program.
I know. There's a lot of intention, and there's things that happen that just you say, wow, this was meant to happen. Might not have been intended to happen, but this was meant to happen. And we had hoped to bring Fabrique last year again, even thinking about an outdoor program last summer, and it didn't quite work out, but they reworked it for the stage. So that's what we're doing. And I like theater, or like dance and theater. I love Cirque. So this is another art form that I'm really passionate about.
That has been another theme for Ovations over the years. Yeah, yes, absolutely. And of course our Canadian connection too. So bringing that home.
Exactly. Yeah. So just over the border, that is where the great, Cirque comes from is from the Montreal area. So, and we've had also actually one of the few American-based companies. We've had Cirque Mechanics. We've had the folks from Timber, Cirque Alphonse. They're also Canadian. But I love the form as a piece of physical theater that also has a story. So anybody who's new to Cirque should, look for the story, not just look for acrobatics. They're actually telling a story. It might not always be, it might not be like a full-on narrative, but there is a story there that's being shared, which is also really magical for young people because they're always looking for the story.
They need that, that some narrative and what they walk away with is amazing too. Mm-hmm. So. Speaking of story, I was watching the opening ceremony of the U.S. Open the other night, and they had the cast
Moulin Rouge
singing the national anthem. And I'm thinking, here's the back to Broadway, and the programming that you're bringing here feels like a best of Broadway.
Yes, it's a best of, and then there's a brand new piece, which I feel like is a complete guilty pleasure. So the best of part is it's the 25th. Farewell tour, and I always joke, Cher is the one that told us what a farewell tour looks like, so we'll see if it's really the farewell tour, but so Rent is coming, and I feel like this is such a great example of there is always a connection, and art is always of its time, and also reflective of whatever time it's in. I'm not sure the best way to say that, but my point being, Rent is a story that was based on La Bohème, which is based on the plague, or Story of the Plague. So here we are, when you on its surface, you go, Rent, it's just a Broadway show. But no, it's actually talking about what it means to be dealing with a plague, which then is reset as AIDS in Rent. So it's this sense of what is it like to be in a situation where there is people suffering, and what are the issues of equity around that, and who's suffering, who's not, and it has some of the best music. And Seasons of Love is we dream of a sing along. I'm looking over at Katie here. We dream of doing a big sing along of Seasons of Love somewhere, somehow, as part of that performance.
Isn't that the message, right? That we all want. I'm getting sort of shivers down my head here thinking about seeing Rent for the first time on Broadway, hearing Seasons of Love, and what it would be like to hear it and see it again now, and that kind of both familiar and strange in this new world that we're in. And so Rent is just one. It's hard to believe.
I know, but just think of all those layers too. Just again, it's something that it would be easy to sort of dismiss as it's just Broadway, or it's just this. And it's no, this is great theater, and it's theater that is it does exactly what it's supposed to do. It's able to morph over time, to stay timeless, and it speaks exactly to the time it's in. It's just amazing.
Speaking of the time that it's in, Hairspray.
Oh, well, Hairspray, I know. Okay, actually, we're really looking forward to Hairspray too, for a lot of reasons, because there's a lot of things to dig into with Hairspray. Also one that feels timeless and also completely necessary and contemporary, and there's some things to dig in there. So we've been having some conversations about how to have some conversations about what's going on in Hairspray, and what John Waters intended when he wrote it, what it looks like from taking it from the movie to this, to then also the movie again.
Right, from the screen to the stage to the screen.
Exactly. And what happened each time those iterations happened, and what was lost and what was gained.
Right.
And both in the storytelling, but also the portrayal. So, Edna Turnblad was envisioned for Divine, which is not how it gets portrayed later in its iterations. It becomes drag, it becomes a man dressed as a woman, it becomes all these other things that it wasn't when it was intentionally written for Divine. So let's talk about that. And then of course there's also some really interesting investigation into segregation and what was happening. Again, what was John Waters' lens when he wrote this, and what was the difference? And he's it's Baltimore too, which is obviously time and place really important.
Yeah. Wow. So.
And then Donna Summer. And then Donna Summer. Again, these are all musical. This is Broadway. And so then we have Donna Summer in the middle, which is in February, which I love because who doesn't need to warm up in February? And who doesn't need that music? And we're just looking forward. And it's her story in that jukebox musical storyline. But she is also somebody that we need to know more about as an artist. And that music, you can't stop.
Right.
It's just too good.
Do you want to say a word about the John Cameron Mitchell too?
Oh, sure. Yes. So we think about Broadway, and then we call what we sometimes say Broadway and beyond. And he sits there, as does Ari and Alan, with Alan coming over there in oik and oi and ok. Sorry. And I just had my own flashback of early days of being at Broadway, and seeing Alan Cumming in Cabaret, which was just probably the most mind-blowing theater experience I've ever had.
I have my own image sitting at the cocktail tables looking up. Yeah.
Do you remember when he comes out from the kick line? He's like, "I'm here," and it's just like, I'll never forget that moment. Yeah. Anyhow, so that's going on, and that's in the fall, and then in the spring or in March we have John Cameron Mitchell doing what is called his love letter to Hedwig. Mm-hmm. So, which I think about again, just these pieces of theater. I actually think about Rent again when I think about Hedwig, and just in terms of how these are pieces of theater that change the course of theater. Yeah, and the performances change the course of theater, and so. It's really about his relationship to that character and living with it for, I think, 25 years. So it'll be cabaret style, and we'll see and hear Hedwig, but it's really John Cameron Mitchell in concert.
At the State, right?
At the State, yes.
So that's kind of a new venue.
Yeah, we've done a couple of things there, not too much, but there's been, first of all, they're fantastic partners. We love the State. We love Lauren Wayne and her team. They're great to work with, and they partner with us on a lot of different things. We actually did Taylor Mac there a couple of years ago, and which was mind-blowing. And so when talking with John Cameron Mitchell's reps, I was like, I think we need something a little grittier with a different kind of history to it. We talked about it, and they agreed that, without question, the State was the right place for this.
Wow, that's gonna be great. Mm-hmm. Well, I wonder if we might change gears for a moment. And I
can't believe we haven't talked about classical music. I'm like, who are you, Ari?
I know. Definitely not last or least.
Certainly not. No, it's the first. I mean, if you think about it, it's the first. It's the beginning.
But it just shows that there is so much artistic activity happening within Ovations and out in the community that you're producing. Classical is definitely at the core and has been at the core of that
for 90 years.
Beginning. Yeah, and yet look at how it's evolved and grown, and in some ways the classical, both roots and grounds and informs. And I'm like thinking about like hearing and participating in all these programs, and then going to a Sphinx Virtuosi program and how that might feel differently than just if it were a standard program in a standard classical season. So. I was excited to see Jessie Montgomery is not only going to be participating, on the program, but as part of the broader partnership.
Hopefully. That Jessie's star has risen very, very quickly. I'll just say Jessie Montgomery is a composer. She has been tapped for so many amazing projects. So her work is on the program. She was supposed to be here. We're not sure now if she's going to be here because she keeps getting tagged for projects.
I went to Kinhaven Music School in Vermont with Jessie many years ago.
No way. Okay.
There's many connections, but if we can lure her here.
Where's Kinhaven Music School?
Oh, it's a one of these chamber music programs that still exists in Weston, Vermont.
Oh, in Weston. Okay, because I know
near the Weston.
I know obviously Marlborough and some of those programs, but
there's a whole diaspora of students who went through that program. Carolyn Shaw being another.
Oh my gosh, yes. We'll just name check her from I can't think of their name right now. The Teeth.
Yes.
The Teeth. Yes.
A Room Full of Teeth.
Room Full of Teeth,
Yeah,
yes, which you
so
presented a couple years ago.
that's another connection. So you're weaving in, without even realizing it, these other
Nice.
educational influences in the area. But so you've got Sphinx coming, Pacifica, the New York Phil Quartet, and
Alexander
and then-
Malafiev.
Yeah, and so talk a bit about the classical programming that's coming this year.
Sure. So, couple things. One of the things that I love about our classical programming, we do focus primarily on chamber, and occasionally, as you see this year, chamber orchestras. The symphony does such a great job in town. There's no reason for us to be bringing symphonies to town. So we really focus on chamber music, and it's really what I get jazzed about, not to use another musical term, is when we can introduce new artists. And one of my favorite things is to be in the lobby at intermission and have people say, oh, where did you find them? Where did you hear them? How did you, all of this, and make those connections for people between these artists, and then have that be their first time. I know there's a lot of people that can count their first time seeing Yo-Yo Ma with, Portland Ovations. I don't even know how many years ago now it was. I used to know off the top of my head, but probably around 30 years ago was the first time that Ovations brought him. So that's always in my mind when I'm thinking about the chamber program, is who can we be excited to share, and also who's some of the if not known names, the more established groups that have been around for longer. So like the New York Phil string quartet is fantastic, because people have a connection to the New York Phil, and then to be able to draw out the quartet from that, and to be able to share that.
To see Cheryl and Frank and
right there, right?
there.
I mean, you'll be at Merrill Auditorium, you'll be, within a few feet, and they always, there's amazing artists and musicians. And then Pacifica, I've been really excited about them in terms of some of their programming, and they have a really unique program that they developed. It's all by women composers through time. So it's a program of really important composers that people don't necessarily know and have as a household name. And the program is really smart and really. I remember talking to somebody early on about the program, like 2 years ago when we first started talking about it, and they said, this is just an important program. This is the people who are in this program are composers that need to be known and need to be heard.
Right. Who are also featured on the Sphinx program in many ways.
Yeah,
like
there's some
Valerie
overlap.
Coleman
Yes.
and Florence Price. And
which is exciting, because then we'll get to hear. So what I love about that, not only are we going to revisit and return to these composers, but we're going to hear very different versions of what they, we're going to hear the quartet version of their compositions, and not the same composition, but we're going to hear their music in a quartet form, and then we're going to hear their music in chamber orchestra form, so which are very different arrangements. So to be able to have people revisit those composers over different works in different instrumentations is really exciting too.
Who is Sphinx? What can you say a bit about?
Sure.
Like as an organization, and what connected them to this season?
Sure. So Sphinx is actually a group, an organization based in Detroit, and it was started by a gentleman named Aaron Dworkin, who is just one of the mavericks of chamber music. I'm gonna name drop now. I was on a board with him at one point, and he had just gotten a Genius Award, and I thought, oh wow, I don't often sit in the same room as somebody who's just received a Genius Award. That gives you a sense of how important the work that he has done in developing Black and brown artists, not developing them, but giving a stage to and a platform. And what I love about Sphinx is, in addition to being exemplary players, they're changing the face of chamber music, and they're naming it. It's not that they're just like showing up differently. They're actually saying it and calling it out. And they're also really trying to change how people experience chamber music. So they're really trying to break some of those walls down of what we were ironically taught as being the right etiquette, which was actually some like really backwards version of things, because if you really take chamber music back to its form, it was in beers.
Music.
Salon music. There was beer in hand.
Right.
You were, it was bar music. And so somehow, some way, we created these artificial rules around it. And not to say that Sphinx is taking it back into the bar, but they are trying to give people the time or give people the space to respond and enjoy the music. And I have to say that Portland has an incredibly devoted chamber music and classical music audience, and I'm excited for them to experience this season because there's so many different ways to experience things.
Well, I think the amazing thing is, like, this is hearing chamber music at its highest level, period, right here in Portland. And you don't have to go to Boston or New York. Like, you can come to Portland Ovations and experience exactly what's happening right now in chamber music. And kudos to you and the entire organization for not only identifying that, but giving it a stage and a place and a space as you talk about it and bringing it home for us.
Well, and I'll say, and I think Boston's one of the few other, there are very few presenters of chamber music and classical music left that are not at a university. And because the amount of money it takes to underwrite these series is not something that most, presenting organizations like Ovations can do. And because we have such a devoted community, we are able to continue doing that. But it is one that there's, like I said, there's very few quote unquote chamber series left that are not seated at a university. And ourselves in like the celebrity series in Boston, which incidentally we are sharing Alexander with. I think we have him the night before he goes to Boston. We do that every once in a while.
That's a common theme narrative.
It works out very well. We like to do that when we can. It's a good partnership with Boston. And so that's just an interesting thing to think about, how, like, when you say that we've been doing it for 90 years, and part of it's because we have the support to do it, and we need to keep having the support to do it.
It's it's just amazing to see how much intentional programming is happening here this season, and how are you navigating the logistics this year coming up in terms of bringing people back into Merrill or into public spaces. And I don't know if you want to say a word about some of those logistics.
Sure. Well, the logistics change regularly. So I think the thing that's important right now is that our number one is the health and safety of our artists, our staff, our event staff, and our audiences. So we are continuing to figure out how to do that. Working with our peers, both locally and nationally, working with our venue partners. Just last night, one of our staff completed a course, a COVID compliance course. These are the kinds of things that we're doing. So people are going to have different experiences than they have in the past. Right now, we are requiring that everybody be masked. We require people to be vaccinated or have a test. We're really thinking about also the fact that there's a large part of our population that can't be vaccinated right now, which is the under 12 set. As the mother of a 7-year-old, that is my number one thing I think about almost every day. So we're really trying to think about how to protect people. And so we really want people to show up vaccinated. Mm-hmm. And then there'll be other logistics that will happen at the theaters in terms of showing proof and checking in and all of that. And I don't want to say too much because it really does change from day to day, and our need to update what those procedures look like. So I just would say for anybody who's coming to the theater, they'll be getting emails from us, and they should always keep checking back on the website because to really be clear about what to expect.
Right. So the website will be a good resource.
It's going to be the number one resource. So the website will be updated with everything that's new and current, and then anybody who has a ticket will be receiving emails specifically with instructions and what to expect.
And Ovations isn't alone in that regard. I mean, art centers across the country are adopting
everybody.
Either vaccination or COVID negative tests.
Yes. I mean, we've been watching from Broadway to all the different venues in New York, the Met. What was happening in Baltimore, what was happening in DC. I mean, we're watching all these different communities and what all the different cultural organizations are doing and are continuing to do. I mean, there's fascinating reading right now about Broadway. If you read about how they're really managing it on Broadway and how they're keeping an epidemiologist, like on staff not on staff, but in the theater, like really investigating how things are working. And then locally, obviously, working with our partners. We're a prime tenant at Merrill Auditorium, along with the Portland Symphony and our friends at FOCO. So really working closely, the three organizations plus the city, to make sure that how we all use Merrill is the safest it can be, and that audiences have the most consistent experience that they can have. And then obviously working with our partners at the state and over at Westbrook to also. So one of the things that people may notice about the season this year is that for the last several years, we've had as many as 9 venues every year. And this year we have less. And that was intentional too, because we wanted to make sure that we could manage the situation and be in fewer spots.
Right.
And understand really well how they worked.
And the city has always been a good partner in helping.
The city's
to
a
think
great
about
partner.
logistics.
The city, yeah. I mean, I can't say enough about the city in terms of their deep desire to make sure that Merrill and the arts organizations that use it, and even the ones that don't use it, but that they're supportive.
It's a lot to be thinking about, bringing all this back to the stage, and the safety of audiences and the artists and staff and volunteers. And I'm looking forward. There were so many programs here that I thought, got to check that box. And
we'll see. I know how to get tickets.
Yeah.
I can help you out.
Yeah. And even I was like, wait, maybe we should sponsor that one.
So, I like that even more.
There's the depth of programming is really fantastic. So is there anything?
Well, that means a lot coming from you, because I know you pay attention to these things. So
I tried. I mean, I think what and I think this is the piece that maybe I can offer in reflection on how much is happening here, is that like many of these projects, including the commissions or even just the ones that you've been working, they take years to come to life. And there are 2 commissions. You've got more in store. You've got programs that have multiple educational and community elements to them. These things don't happen overnight. It's a ton of behind the scenes work to bring the partners together, to have the conversations. And I just, if you want to share more about
I'll just say
the
that
behind the scenes
well,
of it.
I'm just going to say that we have the most amazing staff, and we're 6 people right now. At our, before the pandemic, we were at 9, and we're building our way back up. But everything you're hearing is the work of 6 people. And that's, when I relay that to colleagues, as I say this in front of Katie, when I realize they can't believe that we do as much as we do with the amount of people we have, but everybody on staff is incredibly talented, smart, passionate, committed. So there's a love here to make these things have the fullest life they can.
It really does. And we started the conversation here. I think what you come away with is this idea that Ovations is inspiring all of our senses. And I think that just played, visual and oral and,
get up and move,
the movement behind it, the dance.
There'll be food involved in some places. Maybe we'll get to that when we're safe, but we also see food, as a really important piece to think about when we're talking about how do we share, how do we exchange. That goes back to many of the through lines, but what does home mean?
Yeah.
This last year we had some of the artists give us recipes as a way to connect with the home theme, and what's your favorite recipe? And so we'll hear more about food in this new season too.
Cool. Yeah. And
so just giving you another sense. I didn't want to leave that one out.
Take advantage of all of them. I think I know my senses have been blurred. After staring at a screen for 18 months, I'm kind of craving the opportunity to see that movement and experience kind of our humanity a little bit differently. And so you see that throughout the season here.
We had a concert a couple weeks ago as part of a larger community project called A Message from Far Away, and we were over at the Eastern Prom with Kenan Asma, thank you. I'm losing it's funny. It's like I no longer can remember what happened yesterday. I can only tell you what's 10 years down the road at this point. So we had a beautiful concert with Kenan Asma, and oh my gosh, I needed it, you know. I mean, I feel this is my elixir, you know, this art thing. So having that concert after several months of being behind a screen, and just, it was outdoors, we were sitting on the lawn, you know, there's sailboats in the distance, and so feeling like here we are in Maine, we are in home, this person's visiting us, he's telling us about his home and the music, and there's these, Katie took these beautiful photos, and there's this one photo where there's this older couple, husband and wife, or this is the story I tell myself, at least, it's a husband and wife, and her eyes are closed, they're holding hands and just listening to the music, sitting on lounge chairs. And I'm like, if nothing else, that's it right there.
Right. And it was completely accessible. Like, it was, you know, outdoors.
Free, it was
outdoors. Free. Anybody could attend and feel like this was part of their community.
And it was, yeah, and there was a really, I mean, at one point I was talking with our friends who are partnering with the bigger project, Reza Jolly from the Greater Portland Immigrant Welcome Center, and he was sharing with me who he saw in the crowd from the center's communities, and it was really exciting to think, yeah, here we are, we're all together.
Yeah. I mean, that has been, continues to be a hallmark for Ovations in just how it creates and convenes and inspires community. And you see that all throughout the programming here, and every program is just so thoughtfully put together and intentionally placed. And it's phenomenal. So,
well, thank you.
So there's one program here that really struck me, and I think it also has a great connection point in terms of the work you're doing in schools. So this Dan and Claudia Zane's program, and I'm thinking about it too because of the Haitian connection. So I wonder if you could talk a bit about that.
Sure. And actually, it's funny because when you mentioned earlier about, oh my gosh, now I'm trying to remember what you said. It just made me think of the thing of Claudia and Dan Zane's. It just left my mind. I'll come back to it. But anyhow, I know. So Dan's been with us before. So Dan Zanes came several years ago and was part of our family series and our school series. And for those who are old indie rockers, you might remember Dan Zanes. He was in the Del Fuegos, which is an old Boston band, like a long time ago. And he's originally from New Hampshire. And when we brought him several years ago, we did this incredible residency over at King Middle School, and we invited friends of ours from the Ugandan community. Dan's band was an international band, and so we were trying to think of ways to connect with our international Portland. And so we had friends from the Ugandan community come in and teach kids how to cook Ugandan food, and then we had a huge community supper. And so we're welcoming Dan back in that spirit. And Dan's really, if you didn't see it, there's a great, Dan's married now to Claudia Zanes. And if you can find the proposal on YouTube, it's really dear when he proposes to her. It's so cute. And they're coming, and he has, and especially now with Claudia and her Haitian roots, really thinking about that that global music, that sense of all the different ways that we come together musically and culturally. And so we're going to do, this is another one of our early performances, outdoors, free. It'll be at Deering Oaks Park. So again, right after Bandaloop, we're having a couple of those outdoor series to make sure that people have those opportunities. And with Dan and Claudia, what we're also doing is we're doing a series of truck shows. So we're picking up on what we did last year with our parks programs, where we did on trucks, and we are bringing Dan and Claudia to a number of the Portland schools and doing parking lot concerts with them on the back of a flatbed.
Right. That's
so
awesome.
That's just the beginning of how we're gonna have fun with the Portland schools and the students here in Maine. And we also have another series of digital programs. So cartography, which we talked about earlier, is also going to have a digital life for students. So they'll be able to partake in cartography, which is an incredible piece. I got to see it in New York a couple of years ago. It's all about the immigrant experience, and it's the immigrant experience through young people's eyes, teenagers. So it's what struck me is it's an amazing theater craft and kind of a contemporization and demystification of the immigrant and refugee experience, because I think we might have this sort of one version of it, and then when you hear the stories of these young people and how their lives are, it kind of flips it around a little bit. So that's a couple of the school programs. Rosie, which we talked about earlier, is also going to be offered as a school program in the spring. And then we also have this incredible artist who, Toto Kisaku, who's a Congolese artist, and he will be here. This is actually one of the pieces that's being rescheduled from spring 2020. He has a theater piece about when he was nearly executed at the hands of his own government for his theater. And that's going to be offered to younger, younger people, I should say. Yeah, so it's really meant for high school and middle school audiences. And let's see, what else do we have in? Oh, right, of course, Step Africa. Step Africa's been with our schools for so long, I forget that they're still here. So Step Africa, and again, hopefully we'll be at a place where the schools can come live to the theater, because so many of them have experienced them digitally this last year. Right. That for this is, I just feel like
you have to experience that kind of a program live.
You do, and I feel like I feel like it's gonna be like the Step Africa. They're gonna be like rock stars for these kids, because they've had this experience and they have this energy, and that by the time they get here, I don't think we'll be able to keep the kids in their seats.
No,
which will be fantastic.
I do think that Meryl will be shaking.
We'll be shaking. I know. I love it. There's nothing like 1,900 kids at Merrill. It's such a magical experience. So we have a whole, Dan and Claudia are just the beginning of a whole series of what we'll be doing in schools. And there's a whole nother level of programming also around workshops and some really thoughtful programming that Sarah's doing around supporting educators at this time as well. Right. And Golden Dragon also is offered as a school time. And I will say that is one of the most popular school time programs we ever offer. Is whenever we bring Golden Dragons, the schools love it. And it's a great way. It's obviously high entertainment and a really great way to also check out cultures from China.
Is that connected to like a Chinese New Year program? Or?
It isn't this year. Sometimes it is. It's a little bit late in the calendar for Chinese New Year, but we've had a lot of different ways, because there's some really great Chinese and Chinese American organizations in town to think about ways to explore Chinese culture through this program. And last time we actually had a whole Chinese culture fair where we had people learning how to use chopsticks, or how to write their names in Chinese characters, or just a number of different things. So whenever we can, we try to take the opportunity of what's happening on stage to then explore the themes or the cultures or the disciplines off stage. So thank you so much for listening today, and I'm so thrilled that you were here. I don't get every day to just talk about these things, so thank you for being together with me in conversation just to talk about it. We spend all of our times working on it, that sometimes we don't get to just talk about it and enjoy it for ourselves. So thank you for having this conversation.
Thank you for having me. It's great to visit, and I feel like I have an insider's view of the upcoming season.
And I'll follow up with you on that sponsorship.
Yeah.
Thanks, Ari.
Thanks, Aimée.